Could 2 6th-round picks turn into gems for Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans? One on offense, one on defense. Let's talk about it. Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans, and let's talk about some potential late-round steals. A gem, if you will. Now, a late-round gem to me is the type of player that outperforms the draft slot. So if you're a 6th-round pick and you turn into a somewhat consistent starter or a reliable backup, that's a big-time performance because 6th-round picks, 7th-round picks, and they're basically lottery scratch-off tickets, and anything you get out of them is usually a big positive. That's where a lot of the churn happens in the roster. And just because you're a 6th-round pick doesn't guarantee that you're going to be on this team or on this roster, but these two players picked in the 6th round, one on offense, one on defense, have the chance to become gems for this Texans team. Let's start with the player over on defense. Jamal Hill from Oregon, the first 6th-round pick that the Texans made. He is a safety that's converted to linebacker and played his final season at Oregon at the linebacker spot. Now, you hear safety converted to linebacker, and that may not impress you that much. But Hill is a former safety turned linebacker for Oregon that recruits at a very high level and has had some big-time linebackers and some highly touted recruits come through there at the linebacker position. And his head coach, Dan Lanning, is a former college linebacker, graduate assistant at Alabama, coached linebackers at Georgia. So when Dan Lanning trusts you to move from safety to linebacker, I trust you a little bit more than your typical DB to LB conversion. So with Hill, right away from the jump, he took to the spot like a duck to water, pun intended, because he played at Oregon. But he had a phenomenal first game as a linebacker against Texas Tech, where he notched some tackles for a loss, some pressures, and had a really nice game in what was a high-scoring back-and-forth affair that the Ducks were able to pull out. And then over the course of the season, he put together a pretty solid performance at linebacker. Now, how does he fit in and how does he potentially become a gem for this team? Well, the safety turned linebacker with the athleticism and the coverage abilities, if he's a cover guy that can come in as a backup when you need him and go out there and cover a slot receiver, cover a tight end, and be a difference maker with his coverage, that's something that I'm not sure Henry To'o, Jake Hansen, or some of the other linebackers that the Texans have on the depth chart can for sure say is in their tool belt right now. Now, again, this isn't about starting with Christian Harris and Azeez Al-Shaair. This is about how can you impact the team on the 2-deep right away as a 6th-rounder, and with his coverage ability, should they need to call upon him from a defensive standpoint. I feel like Hill certainly can bring something to the table from that standpoint. And hearing him talk about special teams, doing whatever needs to happen, his skill set, you usually find guys at linebacker and DB filling out some of the special teams. His skill set, when you think about the new kickoff rules and punt coverage, the Texans have been one of the better units in football over the past couple of seasons from special teams overall, with a change to kickoffs and then the emphasis that they put on those players helping out on special teams. Hill really feels like he could be a player that finds himself a role, sticks to it for a year or two, and then should you need to call upon him because Christian Harris needs to miss a week or two, or Al-Shaair needs a week off or two, injuries happen, maybe he's a guy that you can turn to right away with a discernible skill that some of the other linebackers don't necessarily have, and that's why I'm excited about Hill. Now, he's the defensive potential gem in the late round. The offensive potential gem has big-time potential. I am very excited about the player nicknamed Jaws. Jawhar Jordan from Louisville, the running back for the Cardinals last year. I'm very excited to see what he can bring to the table. He was a guy that did a lot at Louisville. He's actually the starter for the Cardinals this past year. His backup, Isaac Gurindo, had an incredible workout at the Combine. Jordan didn't. And then Gurindo went a couple of rounds ahead of Jordan, even though he was the backup and played a little bit more towards the back end of the season. But Jordan was no slouch himself as the starter for the Cardinals. Last year, he amassed over 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns as the starter, ripping off 6.2 yards per carry as one of the better players in the ACC at the running back position. Now, stats and success in college, that's not wholly and totally what gets me excited about Jordan. It's the potential fit for him in this offense. When you read about Jordan and you understand some of the positives to his game, and Dane Brugler from The Athletic is the guy that I focus on a lot because he does these deep dives even on players way down in the draft like Jordan. Brugler feels like Jordan's the perfect fit for a zone scheme. He'll know what to do, he'll make decisions, and he'll consistently get you yards. He'll hit singles, doubles, ultimately hit triples, and then home runs with his ability to see where he needs to go in the zone scheme. Now, Jordan has some special teams usefulness, obviously. He has a kickoff return for 98 yards, a kickoff return for 100 yards for touchdowns. So there's some potential for him to help on special teams. And as I say all of that, compare him to the player that he might be fighting for the roster spot come training camp. That's Dameon Pierce. Well, Dameon Pierce had a tough time figuring out this style of offense, knowing what to do once the ball got into his hands. And his special teams usefulness is a lot lower. I know he had the one return in the regular season, and he had one of the better plays of his season with that special teams return, but he wasn't consistently out there on special teams, and he wasn't even getting opportunities on special teams or in the offense late in the year. So if Dameon Pierce struggles to figure out this offense and show some of the issues that caused him to have a slump in his sophomore season with the Texans, if that happens and Jordan showcases some of those abilities to understand the zone scheme, hit the zone scheme, turn those singles and doubles into triples and home runs, and then showcases a little bit more speed than he showcased in the workouts. Jordan himself said on social media that he was a little banged up at the combine. That's why he didn't run as fast as he wanted to, but he's put some fast times on the clock before. And when you watch him at Louisville, there's no shortage of speed. You don't accidentally end up with a 100-yard return, a 98-yard return, and a bunch of big explosive plays at Louisville because you're slow at the running back spot. So I'm excited about Hill because he has an element to his game that some of the linebackers on the depth chart don't necessarily have right away. But I'm really excited about Jordan. And you think about some of those players, late-round picks that the 49ers used to add to the equation that turned into consistent, helpful players. I think about Elijah Mitchell, a late-round running back pick that the Texans nabbed one time, that the 49ers nabbed one time, that turned into a consistent contributor, even though they had guys on the roster. And again, with Jordan, he's just there to change pace with Joe Mixon, and maybe a couple of years from now, Mixon moves on, Jordan's ready to take over that mantle for him. And if not, he stays a change of pace back. You find a new running back to take over Mixon's spot. It's always nice to have multiple options at the running back position. The Texans haven't had multiple options at the running back position for a very, very long time. It's been one of the weaker spots in this organization for the past few years, and it was one of the weaker spots last year when you didn't have Devin Singletary on the field, even sometimes when you did. But when you didn't have Devin Singletary on the field, you couldn't run the football last year. This team's got to run the football better to help out the O-line, help out C.J. Stroud, and make sure that passing game is even more dangerous. So if that uncut gem that is Jawhar Jordan can turn into a late-round gem that's helping out this Texans team in 2024, that's an exciting thought to have about the sixth-round pick. So a couple of sixth-round picks that maybe can help out this Houston Texans team in particular ways in 2024. I certainly am excited to see what Hill and Jordan can bring to the table. What do you think? Gems in the late round? Did Caserio do something fun with those late-round picks that usually he just sends off, but he actually made those selections this year? Let me know in the comment section down below. On your way down there, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And so much more fun stuff coming up. The schedule release is right around the corner. We'll be talking at length about that, what we do and don't want to see when the Texans schedule gets here. Don't miss any of that. Plus, there's still draft picks and undrafted free agents to break down. I'm not going to leave those guys hanging. There might be a little juice to one of those late-round picks that's even later than these two guys I've just talked about. Appreciate you watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.